Sir, step away from the counter. Now. The words cracked through the bank lobby like a sudden slap. Everything stopped. The soft hum of air conditioning felt louder than ever. Pens froze mid-signature. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve, sensing something was wrong. Conversations collapsed into uneasy silence as every head slowly turned toward the front desk. At the center of it all stood Daniel Carter. Late 40s. Calm posture. A quiet black man wearing a clean gray jacket and slightly worn shoes. In his right hand, he held a single check. No shaking hands. No raised voice. No anger in his eyes. He didn't look nervous. He looked patient. Behind the counter stood Melissa Grant, the branch manager. Perfect hair. Sharp blazer. The kind of confidence that came from believing she owned the room. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she stared at Daniel like he didn't belong there. She reached forward and snatched the check from his hand. Her eyes flicked over it, barely 2 seconds, before she let out a short, mocking laugh. "Where did you get this?" she asked loudly, making sure the entire lobby could hear. Daniel spoke evenly. "It's payment from my client." That was enough to amuse her. "A check this large," she said, lifting into the air. "From someone like you?" The words landed heavy. People shifted uncomfortably. A man in line frowned. A woman near the window whispered, "That's rude." The amount printed on the check, $48,000, caught everyone's attention. A low murmur rippled through the room. Melissa's expression hardened. "I'm not wasting my time verifying this nonsense," she snapped. "We see fake checks every day." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but he never got the chance. Without warning, Melissa turned, fed the check straight into the paper shredder beside her desk, and pressed the button. The machine roared to life. White paper tore apart with a violent grinding sound. Thin strips fell into the bin like confetti at a funeral. Gasps filled the lobby. Someone whispered, "Did she really just do that?" Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply looked at the shredder, then back at Melissa, and said 6 quiet words, calm, steady, and certain. "You shouldn't have done that." Melissa smirked. "Oh, please," she said dismissively. "If you have a problem, you can call security." As if on cue, 2 uniformed guards stepped closer. Their hands rested near their belts, eyes locked on Daniel like he was a threat instead of a customer. The room felt tighter, heavier. Daniel slowly placed both hands on the counter, not in fear, but in control. "I'm not here to argue," he said evenly. "I just need to speak with your corporate office." Melissa rolled her eyes dramatically. "People like you always say that." The words sliced through the air. A woman standing near the ATM frowned. Another customer leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That wasn't right." Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his jacket and calmly pulled out his phone. No shaking hands. No anger. No panic. He pressed one button. "Hello," he said quietly. "This is Daniel Carter." "Yes. I'm at the Grant Street branch. My check was just destroyed." He paused, listening carefully. "Yes," he continued. "Shredded. In front of customers." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel nodded slightly. "I'll wait." He lowered the phone, but didn't put it away. Melissa crossed her arms, clearly enjoying the moment. "You think making a call scares me?" she said loudly. "I run this branch." Daniel slowly lifted his eyes to meet hers for the first time. "Not for long," he said softly. Something in his tone made the room go quiet again. Seconds passed, then 1 minute, then 2. People shifted in place. A man checked his watch. A woman clutched her purse tighter than before. Melissa's smirk began to fade. Suddenly, the glass doors swung open. A man in a tailored navy suit walked in with long, confident strides. Behind him were 2 sharply dressed executives carrying tablets. The atmosphere changed instantly. The guard straightened. Melissa's face drained of color. The man scanned the room once, then locked eyes with Daniel. He walked directly toward him and extended his hand. "Mr. Carter," he said respectfully. "I'm Robert Hale, Regional Director." A wave of gasps rippled through the lobby. Melissa staggered back a step. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding," she rushed out. "This man—" Robert raised one finger without looking at her. Was a check destroyed? He asked calmly. Daniel nodded. Yes. Robert turned slowly toward Melissa. Do you have any idea whose check that was? She swallowed hard. I assumed it was fraudulent. Robert's jaw tightened. That check, he said clearly, was issued by Hale Infrastructure Group. Whispers exploded. That's $1 billion company, someone muttered. Daniel spoke again, his voice still steady. I'm a senior contractor, he said. Have been for 20 years. Melissa's knees nearly buckled. Robert tapped his tablet. You just destroyed company property, he said. Publicly humiliated a verified client and violated multiple federal compliance laws. He turned to one of the executives. Lock this branch. Immediately. Melissa's voice cracked. Please. I can explain. Robert finally looked at her. No, he said coldly. You already did. An executive stepped forward. Effective immediately, she read. Melissa Grant is terminated for gross misconduct and discriminatory behavior. Her banking license is suspended pending investigation. The words hit like thunder. Melissa collapsed into a chair. Security escorted her toward the back. As she passed Daniel, her voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm sorry. Daniel met her eyes. I believe you, he said calmly. But apologies don't undo harm. The lobby stood in stunned silence. Then someone began to clap. Slowly, awkwardly, then another, and another, until the entire room filled with applause. Daniel didn't smile. He simply slipped his phone back into his pocket. Robert turned to him. We'll reissue the check today, he said, along with compensation. Daniel nodded once. Thank you, he replied. But what matters more is what happens after today. Robert lowered his head slightly. We'll retrain every branch, he said. This won't happen again. Daniel turned and walked toward the doors. Outside, sunlight washed over him. No cheers, no celebration, just quiet dignity. Later that week, the story went viral. The bank issued a public apology. Mandatory bias training was enforced nationwide. And one assumption, made in seconds, cost someone everything. The lesson was simple. Never mistake calm for weakness. And never judge someone before you know their truth. Less than 2 minutes later, the glass doors at the front of the bank swung open. A tall man in a tailored navy suit stepped inside, his presence commanding instant attention. His shoes clicked softly against the marble floor. Behind him followed 2 executives, both holding tablets, both scanning the room with serious expressions. The entire bank went silent. No whispers, no movement. Even the machines seemed quieter. Melissa's face drained of color so fast it was impossible to miss. Her confident posture stiffened. The smirk she wore moments earlier vanished completely. The man ignored everyone else and walked straight toward Daniel. He stopped in front of him and extended his hand. Mr. Carter, he said respectfully, I'm Robert Hale, Regional Director. Gasps echoed across the lobby. A woman near the window covered her mouth. Someone in line whispered, That's corporate. Melissa stumbled forward, panic creeping into her voice. Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. Robert raised his hand slightly, never once looking at her. Was this check shredded? He asked calmly, eyes still on Daniel. Yes, Daniel replied. No emotion, no satisfaction, just truth. Robert slowly turned toward Melissa. Do you know whose check that was? She swallowed hard. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I assumed, she finally stammered. Robert cut her off. That check, he said, his voice firm and unmistakably cold, was issued by Hale Infrastructure Group. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. That's $1 billion company, someone whispered. Daniel nodded once. I'm a lead contractor, he said quietly. Have been for 20 years. The words landed like a hammer. Melissa's knees nearly buckled. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. Robert continued, his voice clear and unwavering. You destroyed company property, he said. You publicly humiliated a verified partner. And you violated 3 federal compliance laws in front of witnesses. He turned slightly toward his team. Document everything, he said. One executive began typing rapidly. Robert then looked back at Melissa. This branch was already under review, he added. Today, just answer our questions. Melissa's voice broke. Please. I worked here for 12 years. Robert's expression didn't change. And in 12 years, he replied, you still chose assumption over protocol. He turned to the guards. Secure the shredder, he said, and preserve all camera footage. The guards nodded immediately, no longer looking at Daniel, but at Melissa. Robert faced his team again. Shut this branch down, he ordered. Effective immediately. A collective gasp filled the room. Melissa's eyes widened. You can't, this is my branch. Robert finally looked directly at her. Not anymore, he said. An executive stepped forward, reading from her tablet. Effective immediately, Melissa Grant is terminated for gross misconduct, discriminatory behavior, and violation of federal banking regulations. Her managerial access is revoked, and her banking license is suspended pending investigation. The words echoed. Melissa collapsed into a chair behind the counter, her face buried in her hands. Customers stood frozen, absorbing what they had just witnessed. Robert turned back to Daniel. We'll issue a replacement check today, he said, along with formal compensation. Daniel nodded. Thank you, he replied. But that's not why I stayed. Robert raised an eyebrow slightly. I stayed, Daniel continued, because no one should be treated the way I was today. Robert lowered his head respectfully. You're right, he said, and it won't happen again. As security escorted Melissa away, she looked back at Daniel, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daniel met her gaze calmly. I hope you learn from this, he said. That matters more than losing a job. The doors closed behind her. Silence lingered. Then someone began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. Soon, the entire lobby joined in. Daniel didn't smile. He simply turned and walked toward the exit, unchanged, unbroken, and unbowed. Melissa's voice cracked. Please, I can explain. For the first time since entering the bank, Robert Hale turned and looked directly at her. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, with disappointment. No, he said calmly. You already did. The words were quiet, but they carried more weight than shouting ever could. One of the executives stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She pulled out a tablet, her expression firm and professional. Effective immediately, she read aloud, making sure every word was clear. Melissa Grant is terminated for misconduct, abuse of authority, and discriminatory behavior. Her banking license is suspended pending a full investigation. The sentence hung in the air. Heavy. Final. The words hit like thunder. Melissa's face went pale. Her confident posture crumbled as reality crashed down on her. She took a step back, missed the chair behind her, then collapsed into it. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against the counter, now no longer hers. Around the lobby, customers stood frozen. Some shocked, some relieved, some ashamed for not speaking up sooner. Security approached quietly, respectfully, but firmly. Ma'am, one guard said, please come with us. Melissa nodded weakly. As they guided her away from the counter, past the place she once ruled, she avoided everyone's eyes until she reached Daniel. She stopped. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely strong enough to carry. I'm sorry. Not loud, not performative, just broken. Daniel met her eyes. There was no anger in his face, no triumph, no satisfaction. I believe you, he said calmly, but apologies don't rebuild trust. She nodded once, tears forming. Then she was gone. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft, final click. The lobby fell into complete silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Then from somewhere near the back of the room, a man in a brown jacket brought his hands together in a soft clap. Once, twice. He stopped, unsure. Then another person joined. Then another. Soon, the applause grew, slow, steady, respectful. Not for humiliation, but for dignity. Daniel stood still, the sound washing over him. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. He didn't acknowledge it at all. Instead, he reached into his pocket and calmly picked up his phone. Robert turned toward him. We'll reissue the check today, he said, plus damages for the inconvenience and public incident. Daniel nodded. Thank you, he replied. He paused for a moment, then added gently, but more than that, train your people better. The applause faded. Every executive listened. Because this wasn't just about me, Daniel continued. It was about what happens when assumptions replace procedures. When power replaces respect. Robert lowered his head slightly. You're right, he said. And we failed today. He turned to his team. Mandatory bias training, he said. All branches. No exceptions. They nodded immediately. Robert faced Daniel again. We'll make this right, he said. Not just for you, but for everyone who walks into our banks. Daniel held his gaze, then nodded once. That's all I wanted, he said. He turned and walked toward the exit. No spotlight. No escort. No victory speech. Just a man walking out with the same calm he walked in with. Outside, sunlight spilled across the sidewalk. Daniel paused for a moment, took a deep breath, then stepped forward. Behind him, inside that bank, something had changed. Not because someone shouted, not because someone fought, but because someone stood calmly in the truth and refused to be small. Melissa's voice cracked. Please, I can explain. For the first time since he entered the bank, Robert Hale turned and looked directly at her. Not with anger, not with pride, with disappointment. No, he said calmly. You already did. The words were quiet, but they landed harder than any shout. One of the executives stepped forward, the soft glow of her tablet lighting her face. Effective immediately, she announced, her voice steady. Melissa Grant is terminated for misconduct and discrimination. Her banking license is suspended pending a full investigation. A heavy silence followed. The words hit like thunder. Melissa's confidence drained away. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed in the chair behind the counter, the same counter where she had once stood so tall. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge, eyes wide, breathing shallow. Around the lobby, customers stood frozen. Some stared in disbelief. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Some nodded quietly, as if justice had finally caught up. Security approached without urgency, but with finality. Ma'am, one guard said softly, please come with us. Melissa rose slowly. As she was escorted past the waiting customers, she avoided every face until she reached Daniel. She stopped. Her voice dropped to a whisper, raw and trembling. I'm sorry. Daniel met her eyes. There was no anger there. No victory. Only calm truth. I believe you, he said evenly. But apologies don't rebuild trust. She swallowed hard and nodded. Then she was gone. The glass doors closed behind her. Silence filled the lobby. Then clap. A single man near the back brought his hands together, uncertain. Another followed. Then another. The sound grew. Not loud, not wild, but respectful. A recognition of dignity. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't bow. He simply picked up his phone, the applause fading behind him. Robert turned to him. We'll reissue the check today, he said. Plus damages. Daniel nodded. Thank you, he replied. Then, after a brief pause, he added, but more than that, train your people better. The room listened. Because this shouldn't happen to anyone, Daniel continued. Not here, not anywhere. Robert lowered his head. We will, he said. I promise. Daniel slipped his phone into his pocket and turned toward the exit. No celebration, no triumph, just quiet strength. As he stepped into the sunlight, the bank behind him felt different. Not because someone was punished, but because someone stayed calm, stood firm, and refused to be judged small.